Okay, John.
Oh, God. Any way I can top that? I don't think so, but these are going to try. So let's listen to the Ospreys one more time. They heard enough, and they're tired. They flew all the way down to Colombia, and of course they've been kicking back down there, but they'll be back in March, and so we still play their song for them while they're missing, but they'll be back early March here to Mystery Island, where we are tonight here on McDuff channel. It's called McDuff Lives, and tonight we have a four-way conversation going on with a total of 5 people. I am very honored to have with me George Webb, Addie Adds, Professor Hamamoto, and the ever scintillating Andy DiBala running the board. So tonight it's our trio night with a couple of augmentations, which I'm glad to welcome to the channel. And hello to everyone in the chat room. Very nice to have you all here. And we have kind of an open discussion every Thursday night with the professor and George Webb. And so let's go ahead and get started. I don't know what is on Professor Hamamoto's mind. Often we have a chance to think a little bit before the show, but tonight I'm going to ask Professor Hamamoto to start us off, and maybe he'll surprise us.
Yes, just about an hour ago, I did a talk on my show titled Pokemon Archipelago, right? As in Pokemon Go, and combining that with the Gulag Archipelago, because I'm still trying to figure out the situation on January 6th, when the Capitol Hill situation, and I had a question for George about the demographics of the people. The sense I'm getting from George is that a lot of it had sort of a Woodstockian feel to it. But I contend that it was the Pokemon Go generation who helped to realize that sort of cyber coup that we saw there. People like, let's say, Colonel Vinaman, who are of that generation of game heads, who have figured out that this type of offensive maneuver is going to supplant the clubbing and the beatings that we saw, let's say, in 1968 in Chicago. And this would be a much more slick and less collateral damage, let's say, than what we were expecting from Antifa or BLM. So I just want to get from George, since you were there, you were in the midst of it. Were there any people outside of Ukrainian mercs and Woodstock graduates, let's say people in their late teens to 20s, who might be part of the video game generation?
Well, Dr. Hamamoto, I'm glad you asked me, because I prepared a photo of the wild, riotous crowd that I sent to Andy DiBala. Andy, why don't you go ahead and pull up that slide of those conspirators that are about ready to create an insurrection and take over our democracy and have caused this total lockdown here in D.C. If you can bring up that slide, I think it would answer Dr. Hamamoto's question.
You are actually going to have to give me a second here. It's not letting me. I don't know why it's not letting me share it this time.
Well, the photo that I sent to Andy tonight about the January 6th crowd, we had a good discussion tonight with Wes, who's 70, I'm 60. Most of the people fell somewhere in that demographic. Some people brought their kids who would have been more like Addie's age. But for the most part, and we kind of all agreed that it was sort of the 60 Minutes crowd that was there, and some brought their kids. But it certainly wasn't the person that's being pushed forward now, this Riley Williams. It wasn't her. She's directing people. She's inside the Capitol for the first time, supposedly after having broken through the defenses, and she's directing people. More go here, more. You can just see how staged and contrived this whole thing was. This is supposedly the girl that steals Nancy Pelosi's laptop. So, Andy, you got that?
I do not. For some reason, it's not letting me share the info you gave me. Give me 1 second here.
I can do the old school methodology here, which is, put stuff up next to the screen. That's what you always do when you don't have the cooperating technology. And there it is. There it is. You can see just how wild the crew was there. With Ann Vandersteel and Wes and myself. Do we look like we're about ready to cause an insurrection with doing interviews there in front of the Capitol? You see the Capitol there. There's no insurrection. It's just a bunch of people standing in front of the Capitol interviewing each other, right? Mm-hmm. So the bottom line is, not to try to make too much of a joke of it, but it was not all Addie Ad's kids' age about ready to, storm the Bastille. It wasn't. And Addie was there. He could tell you his opinion.
Yeah, it was. There were definitely outliers, I would say, outside from the demographics that George just mentioned. I mean, there was definitely, younger people of various demographics, races, sexes, etc. But yeah, it was generally speaking a bit older crowd, and there was one family that walked up with me to go meet George that actually fit the demographic that George mentioned as well, of bringing their kids, and their daughter was like 21 or 22, so a couple of years younger than I was, but generally speaking, older, a bit older. I mean, I saw a couple of people, like really old guys in wheelchairs that had someone who's kind of helping them out and assisting them. But as far as the people that George refers to as the orange hats, it was definitely younger and more male-leaning, 25 to 35, probably, maybe even a little older, like 30 to 45, maybe that age. But yeah, that was my contention of the demographics there on that day.
Now, have the people with the orange hats, have they been confirmed to be Ukrainian mercs?
Yeah, I sent Andy a picture of Mr. Yarosh.
Max Yarosh.
Yeah, can you show that picture? Is that letting you share that?
It does not let me share like anything on my actual computer.
See, the Ukrainians are the ones that get away with everything, So I've prepared a low-tech version of Matt Yarosh. But here's Matt Yarosh. He's a Ukrainian mercenary, and he just happens to be at the gate. Here's Matt Yarosh. He just happens to be at the gate the day that they storm the Capitol gate. Go to my camera, Andy, for a second, and show Max Yarosh here. There. And, he's got his attack dog from Ukraine, disruption, and he even has pictures of women he's run down in the metro and raped. So that's nice. And he is your guy who is at, all of a sudden, the South Gate. I'll show you a couple of other pictures. Here's him running down his date in the Kiev subway. There's Matt and how he gets his dates there. And so what are Ukrainian guys doing, right, from the Pravi sector? Why are they there on January 6th?
George, have you confirmed that he's there? Is there, some independent source that confirms that he's there, George? Because I see a picture and I say, well, that might look like the same guy, but I'm looking for a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. CD Media and George Eliason, he's a journalist. Eliason is Eliason. He's banned on Twitter right now, but George Eliason is in Kiev. He's a reporter in Kiev. Here is his Twitter. You can see that. Eddie, can you go to my camera for a sec? And his account's currently banned. Whoops, I go out a little bit. Maybe I'm too close. Maybe I'm not close enough.
But he says that this Yarov guy was at the Capitol and was he part of the Orange Hats or
Yeah,
Was he
yeah.
carrying? Where we spotted him? We can show him on a video, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't actually have the video but Maxime Urash, George Eliasson has done a lot of reporting. He said that this is Kolomoisky's gang. It's Azov brigade and it's Pavi sector, the same groups that were in the Maidan 7 years ago, creating disruption.
Wow.
In his description of his, what he does is making peaceful demonstrations turn into riots, to false flag into riots.
That's pretty heavy, George.
Yeah, so it's independent reporting. I've been trying to get a hold of George, but he's shut down right now on social media, and I want him on this show because I want him to tell you in his own voice because he remembers these guys from 2014.
Mm-hmm. Now, the reason I ask is, gentlemen, I don't know if you know the work of Dave Emery, Spitfire list, huh?
I do, yeah.
John, okay. Well, you might be on his mailing list. I just got this article from him, and it has 4 hours worth of his audio, but the written work is incredible. It's impeccable, and I've been following him for many, many years now, and I can attest to the scrupulousness of his research. And this is something that the Team W research community should read, if I may say so. This is the recent one, and he connects Peter Daszak, is how it's pronounced. Peter, both père and fils, right? Both of them were of Ukrainian heritage, but he connects them with the whole V episodes, right? The word that should not be said on YouTube, and the Maidan coup, in addition to ongoing destabilization programs from Hong Kong. That is, he claims that they're behind the pro-democracy unrest in Hong Kong currently, and also the destabilization of the people in the western part of China, the Uyghur groups. So this is Dave Emery's work here, and of course he connects it to the larger and this is something that John, hopefully you can ask Harley Schlanger. He connects it to this larger early, I guess it has its origins in early 20th century power geopolitics. But there's an individual by the name of Sir Halford John Mackinder, Mackindr, and he developed this concept of the Earth Island. And I know that John and George in particular, you've been talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, or the so-called Silk Road. But Harold Mackinder was prefiguring this. He didn't use that term, but I think it's a retread of this early geopolitical British imperial or neo-imperial plan to connect all these different countries from the Kamchatka Peninsula through the Near East and through, of course, Central Asia and Western Asia. It's called the Earth Island concept. And not coincidentally, Harold Mackinder was one of the founders of the London School of Economics. He was a Fabian socialist. He was part of the coefficients. He was part of this group that we all know and love. I mean that ironically, of course. From reading all the literature, the extant material on YouTube, it's part of our canon now, but it has direct relevance from what I'm hearing from George's reportage on site and the confirmation of these orange hat people that this is an extension of this program that has its roots in the discipline of geopolitics, which Mackinder founded.
Yeah, this gets back to the kindergarten, of roads, and I'm forgetting all of a sudden the guy. Who's that? Milner's kindergarten. Where you have this little kindergarten of people that are your diplomatic pawns that you want to put into a corridor in the future in order to control an area. And this Belt and Road, from Kamchatka all the way to the Baku, and then the Baku all the way to Holland, is Mackinder's thing. And I got to credit Mark Kulak right here and Mark tweeted this out today. He said, before the Fox anchor Steve Hilton talked about Peter Daszak on Sunday night, just getting around to this story, right? I was the first guy. I was the first guy who talked about Sina Bavari and the leak at Fort Detrick. I was the first guy that talked about the breakout in central China in August of 2019 when this leak happened at Fort Detrick. I was the guy who was talking about Peter Daszak and Eco Health Alliance doing this spraying out there in the hinterlands up the Yangtze River before there ever was a breakout 1,000 miles later down the Yangtze to Wuhan, right? I was the guy who was saying all this, right? This is the same cabal who will spray for play. It will. You need a corridor cleared out for the Belt and Road. We'll spray it down. The same people. This came out in our March charrette. We're spraying in Hong Kong during the protests in Hong Kong. Right. Have protests, we'll spray them. And this all comes back to this Kolomoisky cabal. Now, I took it a couple of steps beyond that, talking about Kolomoisky as a sprayer in chief. But just like Gottlieb was the poisoner in chief, we've got Kolomoisky as a sprayer in chief.
And who would be the vaxxer in chief? Well, let's leave that open for now.
It would begin with an F and end with an I.
Yeah.
But that's that Chinese guy, Dr. Fo Chi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in the phone book, yes. But what's interesting about this Emory piece is that, and I agree with his assessment here, is that the Ukraine, and this is not Emory, this goes back to Mackinder, that region, he claims that it's the world historical geographic pivot of history. And the Ukraine in specific, and these characters like the Desak, Pea and Fies are involved with. That's why the Ukraine keeps cropping up over and over again, down to the mercs that show up on the Capitol. It's because of this old multi-generational. Now Harvey Schlanger can talk about, I'm sure, and John as well. These British-inspired destabilization movements that finally hit up. Well, not finally. It's we've been attacked multiple times from the same forces, but it hit us once again on January 6, 2021. And then, of course, in the indie media, guess who's always to blame? Guess who's fingered? It's the Chacoms.
Right.
And the British Empire goes off free.
George, I got it to work finally.
Oh, there you go. Well, there it is, and there's our good friend, Mr. Rosh. But I just wanted to say, Doctor, you really laid this out in Servitors of Empire. About 100 operatives is all you need to take down any country, including the biggest country in the world, China. And you laid that out, how the dynasties ended with 100 operatives, OSS operatives, or the precursor to OSS, the British Special Operations Executive. And there was less than 100 that took our country at that day. It was about 50 at the lower gate and 50 at the upper gate, and 100 operatives took our country that day.
Yeah.
So it reminded me so much of what the work you've done on China with 100 operatives.
Right, with Charlie Sung, right, who, by the way, was trained in the U.S. by a Confederate general who was a tobacco king. I think this was not in any of the books I read, but I think he was probably Scottish Rite Freemason who educated Charlie Sung, and he by the way is the father of Mei Ling Sung and Madame Chiang Kai-shek later on, the three of them, right? That's their father. And he sent Charlie Sung back to Shanghai and funded him, just like you've been talking about, with the dope, with the human traffic, to fund the revolution. With a publishing house, and from Shanghai they were able to radiate outwards and split up the country. And here we are in 2021.
I had ordered some Sterling and Peggy Seagrave books before Christmas, and a couple of weeks ago I got a note from the sellers. It's they're used books, like Thrift Book or something like that, and they said, how did I look like the books? And I said, what books? I haven't got the books yet. And so they said, oh, we'll send you another copy. So I got the next week, I got a box of books from them, and then today I got another box. So it was the mail has been delayed for so many weeks now, and so I didn't get that until recently. So now I have 2 copies of the Sung Dynasty by Sterling Seagrave. If you don't have a copy, Professor, I'll send you one. It's his work is unexplored for me, except for just what I've read, of course, about the Yamashita gold and all that basically online. But now I have 4 Seagrave books to delve into, and I got 2 copies of them. So
wonderful.
Just by coincidence of your mentioning him or mentioning the Sung dynasties, this is something nobody knows about, and you've alerted us to it in your book, and now I want to learn more about the Sungs and how they controlled China for so long, and do they not still cast a shadow through the opium business? I imagine somehow they still exist.
Absolutely, it's amazing, and this is where the bloodlines comes in, the family relations, the family transgenerationally can keep these networks of power intact, far beyond our own lived memory, right?
Yeah.
The Sung people were operating, Mei Ling Sung, that was my parents' generation, not mine. But Madame Chiang Kai-shek died in New York City. I think she was like 110 years old, and she still wields a lot of power. And one of her sisters, by the way, she was supposed to be with Free China, right? Madame Chiang Kai-shek. But her sister was one of the heavyweight in the Chinese Communist Party. So again, they had all the bases covered. It's that same model of being on all the sides at all times. And of course, the little people, which is us, are ignorant of the true history until, of course, the Team W research community started breaking it down. And now hundreds of thousands of people, the secret is out, and John is reading the books, the Sung Dynasty. Everybody's going to be reading that. And boy, the other side should be nervous. They should really need to be hiring some more game heads to create new scenarios, Pokemon Go type scenarios to take over countries. Because they had that guy who was, his name is Wael Goyim, I think, Golim, for, I think it was Google. As soon as the so-called color revolution hit in Egypt, he left the country and came back here, and now he's celebrated as a hero. So you have all these IT people, and I call them game heads, who are now valued resources for the PSYOPs in the Office of Naval Intelligence in the military, the Pentagon in general. They're the ones. They're the disciples. I think Colonel Veneman is a game head. He's certainly not old army, big army soldier that we're used to. He probably manipulates a mouse more than any firearms around.
Well, Doctor, you're leading me into all my lines here. You see these orange hats that are slightly distinctive of the red. They're not the same color. And why would you send in your Ukrainian guys who've been doing Ukrainian operations all over the world to overthrow governments for election operations and covert operations? Why would you send them in to get the communications server? Because you need to move it to the White House. Joe Biden has won the White House. Now you can move it back. If you remember, there's a guy starts with an I and ends with an A, a name that's close to the DNC. They move the server away from the White House because Biden has lost, right? And they move it over here to the Sergeant of Arms office, right? And now it's at the Sergeant of Arms office. How do you move it back? Well, you can send in the guys who use it as their communication server to go get it and then take it back to the White House. This is what I think happened. That's the reason they're there. That's the reason you have Ukrainian guys going in. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get them. Addie and I were both standing there along with Georgia Peach, who you saw Addie interviewing, and we saw them forming up on this grassy knoll. And we saw them put the hats on all simultaneously, and then they were yelling F Antifa, F Antifa, to, I don't know if that's a throw, and then they were bursting through that gate. But this is the first moment of the operation right here at 1 o'clock. And I want to say that the orange hats from Proud Boys, which I think is a diversion, are not here yet. You can look and see up Pennsylvania Avenue. They're not here yet. They're listening to Trump. They're coming down Pennsylvania Avenue up the mall that way. They're not here yet. So this was an operation there. I'm pointing to the grassy knoll, and they went right through there, exactly where I'm pointing right now.
Just adding to the Proud Boys quip, I just read today on Zero Hedge that their leader, Enrico, whatever his name is an FBI informant.
Yeah, Tario, you interviewed Peter Duke.
Yeah, Peter Duke talked to him, I think, right?
Yeah, and went down and filmed Tario and said, if you guys are looking for a white supremacist, you're looking in the wrong place. This guy's half Cuban and he's half black. And Peter was talking to me. I can't even remember if he said it on your show or my show, but that he thought he was FBI informant. Like it was going to be a total diversion. These guys are going to be used in some kind of diversion, right? And then here comes Tario, and now there you go. And he's not only Tario's not only been with Proud Boys for a little while. He's been an informant big time, both local and national since 2012. Mm-hmm. This is the person that they say did the attack, an FBI informant.
Wow.
Now, and they say it's a white supremacist. He's half Cuban. He's half black. How is that a white supremacist? And he is an FBI informant. This is the person out there, you liberals, that you say did the attack. A half black, half Cuban FBI informant.
I would push back the analysis, the timeline even further so far as the Proud Boys is concerned. And if anybody has heard me for the last couple years or so, I was always vigilant about the Commonwealth of Canada. They're sort of really monomaniacal interest on things American, right? Wherever they could be in Japan, right? They could be Stephen Corbett. It could be the other guy with the scary eyes who got taken off of YouTube. But they could be, what's her name? Fantastic Polly or something. They have a really monomaniacal focus on the United States of America when there's a lot of problems that the Commonwealth of Canada needs to take care of, all the way up to the Prime Minister. So far as the Proud Boys specifically are concerned, who is the founder of it? It's Gavin McInnes. He's not even an American citizen. He is a Commonwealth of Canada subject. And he conveniently disappeared when it was all coming to a head. And who did he give it to? He gave it to the Puerto Rican guy to take the fall, who as it turns out, was an informant. So I would say check into Proud Boy. He's a foppish dude who all the young guys like, who have problems with their sexual identity. Perhaps they need a masculine, quote unquote, role model. So he fills that need. But he's the guy that started the PSYOPs called Proud Boys. He also is the guy who founded the PSYOPs called Vice Magazine, which goes to different countries and shows how awful and creepy they are in order to break down create prejudices in their particular audience. So this is all part of a Canadian / British PSYOPs multi-year that saw its culmination on January 6, 2021. And if you want to check Gavin McInnes's father-in-law's background, he's involved in very specialized neuroscience type. Who's that guy with the red hair? The guy that went in the theater and shot some innocent audience member. He's involved in that type of operation. So this is Gavin McInnes's baby. But he laid it out on the minority and then ran away. And then recently he started showing up on InfoWars again with a very sheepish expression on his face. But I did catch a slight glimmer of duping delight a la Steve Pachenik.
Yeah, I see. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on your line. Go ahead. I see you talk about Canada and CSIS, and of course, a long history with the Special Operations Executive and the British intelligence. SOE basically created OSS. The training ground was on Lake Ontario up there at McLaughlin house where they trained Marshal Tito. Marshal Tito, who knew Marshal Tito was up there at the OSS house in Canada, right? So all these things are school plays. And what's beautiful about this research group is we get to pull back the mask, pull back the curtain on the wizard, and show these things for the psych ops that they are. McGinnis is, I thought he came from Ireland for some reason. I didn't think he was Canadian to begin with, but I could be wrong about that. But you're exactly right. As long as I do it outside the border, 5 miles north of Detroit, then it's okay because it's a liaison loophole operation. And I don't have to clear it with anyone on the House Intelligence Committee or the Gang of Eight or anything like that. I can run the operations to my content. I can dossier Trump with Christopher Steele to my heart's content. I don't have any checks. I can just run the operations. That's what we got here. That's why Proud Boys is run by a Canadian and a Puerto Rican.
Right. And of course, Dominion the HQ is in Canada, right? The operations is in Belgrade, but the it's registered in Canada. It's a Canadian corporation running American elections.
Warren Flood.
Yeah, there you go.
Jerry Jendrzak is the father-in-law of Gavin McGinnis, by the way.
What's that?
Jerry Jendrzak is the father-in-law of Gavin McGinnis. That's who's on. He filed for these patents right here, I guess.
Yeah. I checked out his background. I have the notes someplace in a file folder, but it doesn't look good. And no one that I know, and I'm saying it here, I've hinted at it before, hoping someone would pick up the ball and run with it. But now I'm calling him out, Gavin McGinnis, because you helped steal the election for a foreign government. Not you specifically, but people who are aligned with that milieu.
Yeah, we definitely, Aaron and I actually were part of a local political PAC here in Temperance, Michigan, and we had the Proud Boys come to one of our events. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I really don't have anything bad to say about the people I met personally. They all just seemed like a bunch of like ex-army guys that like walked the ladies to the cars at the end of the night, and they all pounded some beers and stuff while we were having the event. They were definitely like the more rowdy people of the group there, and we're having a little more fun than everyone else. But I can definitely see how it's some type of weird little movement they got going on where they all get in line and follow orders to an extent, you can tell. So if there's a definite chain of command going on, and if one of their leaders is FBI informant, that's definitely not good news.
Well, these operations, these intelligence operations, typically also are enfolded into, they're heterodyned with some sort of scene, some sort of cultural scene, whether it's Studio 54 or, whatever, pick your scene. But around this time where all this was coalescing across the U.S.-Canadian border, and Eddie Ads might know more about this than myself, but there was a big scene. It was called Detroit is the center. That's where the genesis of house music is. Am I correct? And
yeah, I believe it started out as techno first, and then I think it transformed to house, and then acid bass, etc.
Acid house. Yeah, but this is where the DJ became a popular phenomenon. And this is also where it went globally internationalized. And this is where creeps who are big DJs with names that start with B and end with I become these top level superstar international famous people. And also, you know who I'm talking about. There's also this guy. He's also Canadian.
Bon Jovi, right?
His sister also happens to be a military bicyclist who, at 40 years old, had some sort of respiratory problems mysteriously. But the guy that really clued me on the whole house music scene and the connection with intelligence operations and mind operations, Cywar, the guy's name is Dead Mouse.
Oh, wow. Really? What do you
Dead
know about
mouse.
dead mouse that I do not, Professor Hamamoto?
Pardon me?
What do you know about dead mouse that I do not? I didn't know he was tied to all this nonsense as well.
Well, all these.
Not
I don't
Eddie's
know, I don't
hero.
even know if he's clued in or not. Probably, he probably thinks he's a genuine talented DJ, right? If it requires mostly it requires a really expensive sound system and a turntable, and
Pretty much.
and of course MTV will do the rest for you. Yeah, there's Dead Mouse, but his whole insignia is about his whole persona is about radiation. He has that universal sign of caution, radioactive, right there. In his videos, they has like spermatozoa flying around being irradiated and destroyed, right? I mean, all these different signals. And of course, you have all the people who are zombified in the crowd who are being entrained by this heavy, heavy decibel rhythmic music, which has been used from the time of Dr. Ewan Cameron down to Jimmy Iovine with iTunes. So this is one of the expressions of it right here.
There's even a subgenre called trance, which I'm sure
Yes.
you're as well. You know,
Right.
just really trance music to put you in a trance.
And there's Goa, as in the dope capital right there in Portuguese or former Portugal. I mean, there's all these different types of referent points that's sort of an intake valve for all these creatures here.
Does that come along with the microdosing culture that's starting to take over like Silicon Valley and parts of the country?
That's what I call the hallucinati.
The hallucinati. I like that. You got that turn point?
You can have it, Andy. Register that sucker.
Oh man.
Well, all these pictures of all these DJs, house DJs, reminds me so much of Nastia. Nastia again ties back to our Kolomoisky, and Nastia works with this DJ that begins with a B and ends with an I. And it just happens to be also Madonna's DJ. So that's right. But guess what? Nastia also is the poster girl for Crimea, an area that our Kolomoisky, our favorite billionaire mercenary warlord, also wanted to take back. So somehow there's a connection to Nastia as a DJ. Andy, bring up Nastia, would you?
I'm not quite sure who. Nastia Lukin?
Yeah, just Nastia DJ.
Yeah, DJ Nastia.
Yeah, and then also, that's not enough as far as connections and dossiers. Just so happens her husband does not one, but two dossiers against Trump. One's called the Black Ledger, which also tags Manafort, and then the other one is the Trump dossier that we know so well.
Lyshenko, right?
Lyshenko, yeah.
Vladimir Lyshenko.
Sergei Lyshenko.
Sergei Lyshenko.
But Andy, you got Nastia for us? Let's just do a whole Nastia slideshow. DJ.
I was gonna
just say Ukraine.
I was picking out a.
You got to do the stills, brother.
Oh, she's supposed to come up. This is her.
There she
is. That's her.
Now, it just so happens that she works for Kolomoisky. She just happens to be married to the guy who does the Trump dossier, married to the guy who does the Paul Manafort Black Ledger, right? And just happens to be the poster girl for Crimea. But there's no connections to Ukraine here.
Mm-hmm. By the way, a lot of these DJs are sponsored by Red Bull, that so-called energy drink. And if you know the history of intelligence work, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, all those people, where they can ship concentrated flavors long distances through ships and all that. They historically have been involved in this type of skullduggery.
Yeah, I would like to pose a question on just to kind of change the subject real quick, if you don't mind. This is going back to the election and the January 6th events, and it appears to me that there really was a chess game going on, and that the deep state's hand was forced, and that's why they sent their mercenaries in to upset the game, to knock the game board over by crashing into the Capitol before the hearing ended. Because if they had let the hearing go on, then the American people would have learned some things that would have caused those people not to look good, and would perhaps have even changed the result of the election. Also, I think that the president's idea was to bring people to the Capitol and to just be there and say, we object to fraud. We are here to say, we as citizens, we saw the fraud, we object to the fraud, and we're going to stay here, or we're going to protest at our we're going to petition for a redress of grievances in a peaceful way. And so the counterplay was to insert the agents that, from whatever all these crazy groups. And I know that the evangelist types were part of it, and there's all kinds of different ones that have gotten a lot of press. But these are all led, in my opinion, by agents provocateur that are there and given the signal, as George has described, that cannon sound or whatever, that said, hey, you got to go, rush the barriers, and let's make this happen. Well, what would have happened if the hearing had concluded is something that we'll never know, because they've just cut it off. No more evidence. Once again, we have this Trump fake impeachment with no evidence. And at the same time, they've entrenched themselves with the fences and the concertina wire and the military presence. And now I saw today that they are going to build a permanent security fence around the U.S. Capitol. Well, What I see when President Trump doesn't stand up against all that stuff, when Mike Pence folds, and when the president gets to the point where he has, he sees the play. The play is to destroy the hearing, upset the chess game, push all the, knock it over so that nobody can finish the game. That was the play. At that point, he knew that he had to stand down his people. He had to get everybody home safely. He had to make sure that he does not get associated with this violence. And that was inevitable that he would have to do that. That's the way that game was ended. It wasn't ever really officially ended. They just knocked the table over and grabbed all the pieces for themselves. Now, my question is, it looks to me like things that we don't see are in play. Threats, the possible use of, and I will just say the Club K story that was actually mentioned by Mike Adams. George, that's been your story for 3-4 years now. And, with all these containers all over the place, and with all the way that they can hide them, wouldn't there be a point at which, the bad guys would say, hey, if you don't fold your tent and get out of town, we're going to start blowing things up. Do you think it got that serious, George?
I don't think it got that serious. I think that was the whole card. If things got really bad, if let's say that somehow we would have been able to stop the Orange Hats from crashing the gate, and somehow the vote would have went ahead, and somehow at the hearing, the 4-hour hearing per state, it would have been thrown into limbo. The election would have been thrown into a kind of a court. Then I think you might have seen the Club K scenario where you say, okay, well, we're just going to go ahead and dust Chicago, or, Kolomoisky could have just fired a few of those off. JFK used to talk about how the Russian embassy supposedly had a nuclear weapon. And so if they ever went too far out on a limb, they would just explode the atomic weapon. at the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. It's a variation on that. It is kind of a gun to your head diplomacy that I think sometimes the Shabbat Lubavitch people are asking are the Ukrainians somehow Jewish? And I think it is Chabad Lubavitch, blood and soil. This is Lebed. Lebed was their leader. He was the guy who consorted with the Nazis to kill so many. And they were more bloodthirsty than the SS, this group in Western Ukraine. And this same group, these same symbols and these same family members and so forth are a member of this Pravi sector and a member of this Azov brigade. Now, Azov brigade and Dnepr brigade, Azov especially, goes into Chechnya and goes into Georgia and all these other former states. So I don't want to just say Azov is Ukrainian, but I definitely say Pravi sector, which does the political operations, definitely is Kolomoisky in Ukraine. And John, you're right. Kolomoisky has this capability of Club K, which are these covert missiles in a box that can wake up in the middle of the night. We saw them in Aleppo. We saw them in Ghouta in Syria. We probably saw them in Libya. We just don't know it. And that certainly is a deterrent to, like you said, disrupt the normal workings of a democracy.
Yeah, gun to the head is the way I'm starting to see it. And if it really is gun to the head, then I'm kind of like, my hands are tied. What can I do? You know, all I can do is talk about it. But I think we had to take it seriously. So thanks for taking my question there. Professor, did you have any thoughts on that idea?
I was just, I mean, this is a side exploration, but, you know, I had to listen to some music today. And I was listening to John Wesley Harding and Nashville Skyline, right? 67, 69. And I thought of you two, John and George, because I calculated, and those were probably the last two albums where Bob Dylan had anything to say. And he wasn't even 30 years old, but he was done. But you two guys are going stronger than ever. And when I'm listening to you guys break it down today and put an even finer point on it, I said, damn, that's pretty good. That's worth, that makes life worth living as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, you guys are going really great. Thank you very much.
It's got my attention, that's for sure. I'm quite serious about it, and maybe too serious sometimes. So that's what I like about our little trios, because we always have fun along with along with the heavy stuff. Okay, who's got something else for a few more minutes? I'll sit back and listen.
I got something else. I interviewed a guy today who told me where Iran-Contra started. And Iran-Contra actually started on a fishing boat in North Carolina. Iran-Contra, you heard it here first, started on a fishing boat in North Carolina. I'm going to prove it to you. And I interviewed the author today. And John, I told him I don't have a channel with Noriega, but so he could interview with you on a long form. But this person here just got a book deal for a thing called Sea of Greed, Greed, about how these guys who are running marijuana in the hundreds of thousands. Oh, there, Andy's got it right there.
I'm a professional.
Yes, you are. And
Absolutely.
And there's the guy to the left, Dazak, that was running those boats. And there's the prosecuting attorney that prosecuted him. This guy made so much money and filled up this bank in the Bank of the Caymans. This is Les Pendleton who wrote the book. He's written 15 books. He's gotten 3 movie deals. He just got the movie rights to this, Sea of Greed. And what he had said was that they filled up the bank in the Bank of the Caymans, and they couldn't take any more money. They said, we can't account for all this money. So they moved it to the Bank of Panama with Noriega. And this is how this whole thing came about. So they made a deal with the prosecution because they wanted to take Noriega out in Panama. And so this whole story. But this is this never-ending search that we're on. We keep meeting these great authors like Ed Haslam or Dr. Hamamoto or this gentleman, Les Pendleton, and we keep getting smarter. and we keep researching. And Stephen Kinzer, we want to meet. He's written some great books. I'm trying to think of the other authors with brothers that we want to meet. That gentleman, we met Doug Valentine. This is why we're not done. We're not done here. We're just getting started.
Doug's going to be back on my show in about a month or so. We're lining that up right now. I heard from him today, and grateful that he's going to join us for some more amazing revelations. That has got to be the most amazing show I've ever been in, George, was the one where Doug Valentine, the author, and I, the reader, come to both realize at the same time that one of the characters in his book is my father. And that you talk about, I mean, that lightens my heart so much. I all the grief that I have kind of gets lessened when I realize, wow, this is real. We got a real story about my dad. And not only that, but it's a terrifically heroic story. The book TDY, in case you haven't read it yet, get a copy. TDY by Douglas Valentine.
Hey, Andy, could you put up Connie Bevan's comment? Just display it in the comments. And I mentioned this to. This is what's so great as you go forward in these searches. I mentioned Doug Valentine's TDY, and Les was like, "Oh, I know Doug. Oh, he's that guy." So it's kind of like this parlance, this network we've got going, and it just gets better and better. But this is George Eliason. I guess Connie had alerted me to all these ex-Azov brigade guys that were at the Capitol Gate with Pravy Sector in Ukraine, running all the Maidan operations. And Connie's been just a tremendous help in this whole identification of who crashed the gate and started these election operations.
For those on the road, it says if you contact George Eliason on Facebook, you'll find out all about the atrocities that Azov Battalion and Pravy Sector committed in Donbass and Donetsk, two of the three ancient imperial cities of Russia. Thank you.
Good. And I absolutely endorse what you just said about Connie. She's been in this longer than I have. She's a completely faithful follower of George's, and now she works very hard to transcribe everything and put it up on her Patreon, which is a great thing to support.
And, Connie, we all learn incrementally. She talks about Donbass and Donetsk being the 2 and 3 ancient cities of Imperial Russia. Imperial Russia means white Russians. White Russians. This takes you back to Louisiana. This takes you back to George de Mohrenschildt. This takes you back again to the McDuff story with Kolomoisky saying he was the last of the Romanovs. This is the Rockefellers' arm, the blood and soil arm that's going to go get the oil for me, right? You've got to convince some group like the White Russians, because the Baku, remember, that's why they're so interested in White Russians. And who goes to prep school with not one, but two Rockefellers and a de Mohrenschildt, none other than our McDuff.
George has written a book, and now a revised edition with pictures, and it's available on Amazon. How many pages is the McDuff book now, George?
101. I didn't want to do 111 because there's a guy with an I and an A that might get mad at me. So yeah, I'll keep it at 101.
Wait, yeah, I got a sound drop for when you say his name.
Well,
the YouTube police.
IA. Well, I want to say Eddie did a 10-page index along with all the footnotes that actually does make it a 111-page book. No, it was just a happy accident, right, Ads?
Yeah, why not 111? Because the 1, 2, 3, I thought you were talking about the Dropbox at first. What's the 111 reference?
The 111 is the reference to the Pakistani ISI.
Okay, gotcha.
Musa. So anyway, yeah, 111 is made with that hand symbol right there, and that's the special hand symbol that we can't say on YouTube.
And isn't it also Fort Huachuca?
Well, Chris Hunter, I don't think you've done a lot with Chris Hunter yet.
No, I don't know who it is.
He's kind of a technical guy, and he knows all these IP addresses and everything. And I'm going to send Chris. He's the IP hunter. Chris is the IP hunter with Paul Cottrell, and he runs down all these IP addresses. And all these people, these Ukrainian weapons brokers, have IP addresses leading back to, as John mentioned, Fort Huachuca, and also an arsenal in Alabama known as the Redstone Arsenal. When I first met John, our first video was done at the Redstone Cafe in honor of the Redstone Arsenal and the Redstone IP addresses. There you have it. We're going to New Orleans. We're going to go to NASA, where they got the big thing. We're going to go to 544 Camp Street. We're going to go to Lake Pontchartrain, to the Lacombe training camp. It's all in our purview. It only gets better from here. Get on the Osprey train. Now's your time. Clubospreys.com.
Bon temps roulé.
George,
Let the good times roll. Let the good times roll.
I'd like to skip the tour of the monkey farm, though, please.
Well, you mentioned that.
I know.
You mentioned the monkey farm, but what tour would be complete without seeing a way that you could jump from a simian virus into humans? At that time, when Ed Haslam wrote about the monkey farm out there on the big NASA, the 300 acres east New Orleans, he was talking about SV40, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get to HIV, right?
Yeah.
Don't we have now the same thing? A monkey virus moved up from pigs, then to bats, then to monkeys. Could have gone a couple of different bounces, but then went to humans. This new bioweapon, there were 5 or 6 new bioweapons. It's going to be Daegu. I'm sorry, here's my prediction. It's going to be Daegu. It's going to be South Korea. That's where the weaponization of this coronavirus happened. It is going to be the monkey lab in Daegu.
And that's the Shinjonji cult. Is that right? What you're
Shinjonji cult is there in Daegu. They had a power base and a political faction based there around President Park. Well, guess what happened after that story broke? Park ended up dead. Hey, presidents die all the time, right? Shincheonji these are the super spreaders. What were they before Shincheonji? Remember, 30 countries, that's a lot of countries for a cult, and 650,000 followers. Doesn't that kind of sound like a cult that's state-sponsored? Guess what they were before they were Shincheonji? The Moonies. They were the Moonies before Shincheonji.
right.
It's a super spreader cult. This was a weaponized cult. This is a weaponized super spreader cult. This is how bioweapons are done, through super spreader cults.
And you have the wife of the governor of Maryland who has contacts with South Korea, and they brought in those masks, right, under the radar.
And also, Doctor, you're so right. Governor Hogan here in Maryland. I'm not in Maryland right now. I'm in South Carolina, but we were in North Carolina earlier. But yes. Oh, you know what? Let's bring in a secret shipment of 750,000 PCR tests. Doesn't that sound like I'm collating? Doesn't that sound like I'm collating from 30 countries and bringing them all to South Korea? And then through the South Korean ambassador, Harry Harris, secret flight, first time only from Incheon, nonstop, no passengers, nonstop to BWI, right? And then, we have to have an armed guard take the PCR tests off. These are inanimate PCR boxes of tests. Why do they need to be taken off of a secret plane in the middle of the night with an armed guard, right? If it wasn't a collation of all the Shincheonji infections from 30 different countries. It's going to be the answer to the test. This was done by Harry Harris. This is an extension of Unit 731, the old program, Doctor, you know it, from mainland China that the Japanese ran in Nanjing. You wrote about it. I can't remember the gal's name, the rape of Nanking you wrote about.
Iris Chang.
Iris Chang.
Yeah. Well, bringing it all together as we close out the hour, just flew right by on us. But so many things that you wouldn't think would come together, but they do come together. And definitely, as a Marylander, I've been watching this story about the tests, and 2 things that I just want to add. The first one is that we had a story a few weeks ago saying that those test kits were contaminated, and so they're not going to use them. So what does that mean? That means that they probably were something like George suggested, and they can't use them now because they've been busted. And maybe the fact that Team W has been busy, maybe have saved people from having one of those corrupted test kits stuck into their nose and thereby getting sick. That's a terrible thing to suggest, but we have to. What the hell is going on when you fly a plane load of medical supplies without permission from the government secretly? It's insanity, and that's just part of the craziness that's going on in the world today. Okay, time for final words from anybody that hasn't had a chance. I really do appreciate everyone being with us tonight, especially you, Andy, who's been throwing up some great graphics and helping us with the sound and everything else. Professor Hamamoto, thank you so much, sir, for sharing your Thursday evenings with us here. And Addie Ads, George Webb. What a team. Everybody in the chat room, you're all part of it. It's McDuff lives. He lives through us. He lives through the books we read, through the stories we write, through the reporting that we do out on the streets, and through the great conversations we have. So thank you all so much. It's been a great pleasure for me. And time to say goodnight.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
All right.